The scene is perfectly familiar. You bring your new rescue dog home. They are quiet, they are compliant, they sleep gently at your feet and ask for nothing. You take pictures. You tell your friends you found the unicorn, the perfect, grateful rescue dog. The honeymoon phase is beautiful, but then day 90 approaches, and everything falls apart. Suddenly the dog is barking at the front window. They are growling when you move them off the sofa. They are lunging at the end of the leash. The quiet, submissive angel has vanished, and in its place is a creature you don't recognize. You panic. You assume the dog is broken. Most people assume that now that the dog feels comfortable, it is making a calculated attempt to climb the household hierarchy. They think the dog is trying to dominate the home. They think the rescue is finally showing its true aggressive colors. But behavioral neuroscience tells a completely different story. Modern ethology wholly rejects interspecies dominance theory. Your dog is not plotting a coup. Your dog is not trying to be the alpha. What you are witnessing at the 3-month mark is not a regression. It is a biological unraveling. Because this isn't just psychology, it's chemistry. You've probably heard of the 3-3-3 rule in rescue. 3 days to decompress, 3 weeks to learn the routine, 3 months to feel at home. It sounds like a cute, arbitrary rhyme. It is not. The 3-3-3 rule actually mirrors the metabolic half-life of chronic stress hormones. Moving from a shelter to a home triggers a massive cortisol and epinephrine spike. Chronic stress forces the dog's HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, into absolute overdrive. The good behavior you saw in week 1, it wasn't gratitude. It was acute autonomic stress. High allostatic load triggers a passive coping strategy: freezing, appeasement, systemic shock. A 2022 study out of Arizona State University's Canine Science Collaboratory proved this. Researchers tracked the salivary and urinary cortisol levels of shelter dogs moving into new homes. The data was startling. Cortisol levels dropped significantly within the first 72 hours, the first 3 in the rule. But prolonged stabilization of the HPA axis required weeks to months. The dog's baseline personality remained chemically locked away until the cortisol cleared. When your dog starts growling over a toy at month 3, they aren't getting mean. They finally have the biochemical bandwidth to exhibit active coping strategies. The environmental insecurity was there all along. It was just suppressed. Then comes the second assumption. Your dog suddenly lunges at a tall man in a hat at the 10-week mark. Most people assume they must have been abused by a tall man in a hat. You think they are retrieving a repressed memory. But behavioral neuroscience tells a completely different story. While abuse does happen, this sudden reactivity is overwhelmingly driven by ontogenetic trauma, a lack of early socialization. During the critical socialization window, between 3 and 16 weeks of age, neural pathways are pruned. Without adequate exposure, dogs develop a hypersensitive amygdala. They become biologically wired to fear novel stimuli. It isn't a memory. It's a misfire. In the first weeks of adoption, your dog was environmentally flooded. Their brain suppressed localized fear responses just to prioritize basic survival. But around the 3-month mark, baseline cortisol drops. The brain wakes up. It begins performing localized risk assessments. The sudden barking at the loud truck or the man in the hat. It is the brain finally processing unfamiliar phenotypes as localized threats. It is fear generalization. The threat response isn't new. The dog is just finally safe enough to express it out loud. Because trust is not a conscious decision for a dog. Trust is a neurochemical baseline, and building it requires flipping a switch. Enter the oxytocin vasopressin loop. Trust is built via the upregulation of oxytocin receptors. In rescue dogs, novel environments initially spike arginine vasopressin, a neuropeptide directly linked to hypervigilance and aggression. Over a 90-day period of consistent, predictable routine, the ratio begins to flip. A landmark 2015 study from Azabu University in Japan measured this exact phenomenon. Researchers tracked urinary oxytocin in dogs and humans during mutual gaze. The results? Mutual gaze triggered a staggering 300% increase in canine oxytocin. But there is a catch. Anxious, newly adopted dogs avoid eye contact. The stress blocks the gaze. It prevents the loop. It takes weeks of habituation for a rescue dog to comfortably engage in this gaze-mediated chemistry. We can measure this invisible shift through heart rate variability, or HRV. HRV is a highly accurate proxy for emotional regulation. Low HRV means sympathetic dominance, fight or flight. High HRV means parasympathetic engagement, rest and digest. A 2012 study by the University of Pisa used cardiac monitors on newly acquired dogs. They found severe HRV depression in novel situations. The dogs were trapped in sympathetic arousal. But as the human-animal bond solidified over months, HRV steadily increased. The dog literally learned how to self-soothe. When HRV increases, behavioral inhibition lifts. The dog barks, the dog plays, the dog guards. The invisible wall comes down. This timeline is so predictable, you can set a watch by it. A longitudinal study by the Royal Veterinary College tracked 426 shelter dogs over 6 months. They found that problem behaviors, territorial aggression, resource guarding, separation distress, did never peak upon immediate adoption. They showed a statistically significant peak between the 2 to 4 month mark. Environmental suppression fades. The dog emerges. This isn't a failure on your part. It is the dog's biology doing exactly what it is programmed to do. Because this behavior isn't an accident. It is deeply rooted in the evolutionary biology of Canis lupus familiaris. Think about the dog's ancestors. In ancestral wolves, moving into a novel territory was highly lethal. A solitary, displaced canid that immediately barked, guarded resources, or challenged local predators would be quickly killed. Evolutionary pressure selected for intense behavioral suppression, inhibition of vocalization, muting of territoriality. You hide until you know it's safe. Only after the canid had mapped the environment, identified escape routes, and verified a lack of apex predators, a process taking weeks to months, would normal behaviors resume. Your rescue dog's 3-month behavioral shift is the modern expression of an ancient, life-saving survival algorithm. But the modern dog has something the wolf does not, a genetic anomaly that makes them biologically desperate to bond. And this DNA aggressively conflicts with the intense fear of rehoming. A 2017 study out of Princeton University isolated structural variants in genes GTF2I and GTF2IRD1 on canine chromosome 6. In humans, deletions in this exact region cause Williams-Buren syndrome, a condition characterized by extreme, indiscriminate hypersociability. These genetic insertions are literally what separated early dogs from wolves. Your rescue dog's DNA forces it to seek human attachment. It drives them to suppress fear to appease you initially. They are battling their own genetics just to survive the living room. This bond isn't new. It is ancient. Look at the Bonn Oberkassel dog. Archaeologists in Germany excavated a late Paleolithic grave dating back 14,220 years. Inside, they found a human buried alongside a 27-week-old puppy. A 2018 analysis by the University of Bonn proved the puppy suffered from severe canine distemper virus starting at 19 weeks of age. A puppy cannot survive distemper for 8 weeks in the wild. It requires intensive human care, feeding, cleaning, warming. This proves that the emotional and survival dependency between humans and dogs is over 14,000 years old. When a dog is abandoned, this ancient evolutionary safety net is severed. Decompression is the slow, grueling process of reestablishing a 14,000-year-old biological contract. And yet, here they are, trying to trust you. But here is where we must pivot, because missing this next piece of science can be fatal. When owners witness sudden behavioral changes at the 3-month mark, they often assume it is simply decompression, but a sudden regression, the appearance of unprovoked aggression, or a failure to decompress entirely, is a veterinary emergency. During the honeymoon phase, your dog was flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones are powerful analgesics. They kill pain. As those stress hormones drop, their pain-killing properties vanish. The physiological shield disappears, and what was once written off as a behavioral quirk is suddenly unmasked as a severe, hidden medical issue. Dogs are evolutionarily wired to mask pain. Showing weakness in the wild invites death. When the rescue dog finally relaxes at month 3, chronic pain becomes the primary driver of behavior. You might think the dog is suddenly resource guarding a dog bed. In reality, the dog is desperately protecting a dysplastic hip from being touched. A 2020 study from the University of Lincoln's Animal Behavior Clinic looked at dogs presenting with sudden onset behavior problems like aggression and handling sensitivity. They found that up to 82% of cases had a significant underlying pain component, mostly osteoarthritis or occult soft tissue damage. 82%. Let that sink in. Any sudden aggression after the decompression phase mandates a full orthopedic exam. But it doesn't stop at the joints. It reaches the brain. If you adopted a senior dog, 7 years or older, and they seem to decompress but then begin staring at walls, losing house training, or showing sudden aggressive confusion toward you, it is not stubbornness. It is neurodegeneration. A 2010 University of Sydney study tracked canine cognitive dysfunction, or CCD. It is driven by amyloid beta plaques, practically identical to human Alzheimer's. The profound stress of rehoming can rapidly accelerate the clinical signs of CCD. It causes sudden behavioral disintegration that perfectly mimics failed decompression. And finally, the silent endocrine disruptor. Sudden lethargy, unprovoked fearfulness, erratic aggressive episodes emerging months into an adoption. This isn't a training issue. It can signal autoimmune thyroiditis. A landmark study from Tufts University proved that behavioral anomalies are often the first and only clinical sign of early-stage hypothyroidism, long before the weight gain or the hair loss. Low thyroid levels drastically alter serotonin and dopamine metabolism in the canine brain. Dogs presenting with sudden onset owner-directed aggression frequently show thyroid autoantibodies. Before you hire a behavioral trainer, you demand a full thyroid blood panel. If the vet clears them, you are left with the reality of decompression. It is messy, it is exhausting, it is heartbreaking to watch a dog struggle with their own environment. You might feel guilty, you might feel overwhelmed. You might look at the barking, pacing animal in your living room and wonder if you made a terrible mistake. But you have to shift your perspective. Your dog isn't trying to give you a hard time. Your dog is having a hard time. They are shedding the hormonal armor of survival. They are lowering the drawbridge. The fact that your dog feels safe enough to tell you they are scared is a massive victory. Trust is the ultimate act of vulnerability. For 90 days, your dog held their breath. They suppressed their biology, their fear, and their voice, just to map the environment, just to survive. The sudden emergence of behavioral quirks isn't a betrayal of your hard work. It is the proof of it. The cortisol has cleared, the vasopressin has dropped, the oxytocin loop is beginning to fire. The ancient 14,000-year-old contract is being signed. Your rescue dog is finally waking up. They are finally showing you exactly who they really are. The decompression period is not just a test of patience. It is the rebirth of a predator's trust into a family member's devotion. It holds the weight of millennia of evolutionary survival. Have you adopted a rescue dog that radically changed their personality after the first few months? Tell me exactly what behavior they unmasked in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe, because in the next video, we are breaking down why your dog sighs deeply before falling asleep. And I promise you, the science behind it is even stranger than you'd expect.